Today we're joined by Corbin Smith, formerly of Sports Illustrated and presently of Locked On Seahawks, and a new project that we're going to talk about a little bit. We're going to talk about a little bit, but not too much because it's a little bit of a secret for Corbin to announce. Please welcome Corbin Smith to the podcast. How are you doing, Corbin?
Thanks for having me, Casey. Appreciate it.
So, I mean, it's a little bit serendipitous. I've been waiting to bug you about this thing we're going to talk about. We have a very specific thing to talk about, but you happen to have some news yourself, and that's just serendipitous. So can you tell me about you no longer work at Sports Illustrated as of today or yesterday, right?
It was February 1st, so it's been
Okay.
3 days now.
Okay.
Made the mutual decision. Just decided that I was ready to try something new, and they
Sure.
had some different plans for what they wanted to do with the Seahawks on SI site. So I decided to move on. Again, it was a mutual thing. No bad feelings or anything, just a mutual decision.
Sure.
And I'm excited because, it gave me an opportunity here the last few weeks to kind of look at my options, see what I wanted to do. And I'm excited about a new project that we've got coming that is going to be unleashed on the 20th of this month. So I'll get a little bit of a break, and then it'll be back to the hard reporting.
Yeah, February 20th. Look out for big things from Corbin Smith. And it's going to be, I'm excited for it. The little bit you've told me sounds pretty cool. I'm also, by the way, big fan of quitting stuff. Nobody's a bigger fan of quitting stuff than me. I think it's great. I think every year I listen to this podcast called The Upside of Quitting. It's a Freakonomics episode, and they talk about like the benefit of quitting things early. And I'm like, every year I listen to it, and then I just like cut stuff out of my life that's not making me happy or making me money, basically. And I'm fully supportive of people quitting. No matter, I know people love your work, but if you don't love your work, who cares? Quit. That's what I say.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes you just have to have something new. I think that
Sure.
everybody's got to be open to, because I'm somebody that's really loyal. I'm committed to what I do. But sometimes you got to look in the mirror and say, look, what's going on right now? Maybe it's worked for 7-8 years, but I'm ready for something different. And
Sure.
I've always been into the mindset. I'm not a quitter, but again, to me, this wasn't even quitting as much as it's just two sides saying, look, this is what I want. This is what I want. Hey, I don't think this is necessarily going to work. Let's move our separate ways. And there's nothing wrong with that.
I'm presently, like, as we speak, I have a clip on social media that's going like semi-viral. It's approaching 1 million views on TikTok and 300,000 views on Instagram. And it's about my grandpa and how he had this like just puritanical work ethic. And he worked at this aluminum plant for 40 years after he got out of the military, and how our generation is not. I don't know how old you are exactly, Corbin. You're like, you could be 25 or 58. I have no idea. I don't know. Do you reveal your age on anything?
I'm 35. I'm right in
Okay.
the middle of that age group. So
cool. I'm 38, so we're like in the same. I thought we were in the ballpark of each other. I was right. My grandpa was like, would have never quit Kaiser Aluminum until they forced him to retire, basically after he had like a workplace injury. And yeah, that is not me. I had one bad experience with an employer, and I was like, fuck this. I'm never going to be that guy that's like a 40-year employee at a manual labor job that doesn't care about me at all. And I'm glad I had that experience young, because I wish my grandpa would have had that experience at some point,
Yeah, and I think that, the era that we're in, things are a little bit different too. I mean, you're talking post-Korean War, like people were just excited to be back in a normal situation where they could, have a job and put food on the table for their families. And I think, this era, it's a little bit different because, fortunately, we're not coming off any like significant wars or anything like that.
Sure.
So it's just, different generations. That generation gap is always going to be there. The next generation below us and the one below them, look, we're never going to be able to relate to them. And that's okay, because the generations ahead of us that were older than us, they can't relate to us. They thought we were the weirdos. So that's kind of how it goes.
Well, it's like, I mean, generations are going so fast now. I was working with a comic who's 26 years old the other day. We were talking about just like, I was like, because to me, YouTube still feels like modern media, right? And for her, she's like, yeah, that's like boomer shit. Like, I don't care about if it's not TikTok, it's like, who cares? And I was like, oh, wow. I feel like, to me, YouTube feels like it's cutting edge. Like, I'm putting stuff on YouTube that is cutting edge. And she was like, yeah, dude, that's like, my grandpa puts stuff on YouTube.
Yeah, that's going to be the way it's going to be 10 years from now with TikTok.
Oh,
There'll be something else that arises. I mean, I think the next thing is you're going to be able to lift your wrist up and be like watching videos through your blood veins or something. Like,
yeah, that's a half a second clip.
The next step. I mean, we basically have it already. The phones are already in our hands and glued there. So now why not just put them inside of our bodies? So
I know.
Make it easier for the government to monitor you too, I guess.
There was a great joke about that. Like, people thought they would put a microchip like in your head to track you, and it's like, no, they put Angry Birds on it, and now that's your tracking device. Yeah.
There's any of those games, Angry Birds or what's the one? Candy Crush. Like, you were talking about something that's had staying power, man. Like that Candy Crush. When I was in college, that was huge, and like now. That feels like that was a long time ago, and you still see ads and people are still doing it. But yeah, that's how tracking already is done in a lot of ways, is through those game apps.
For sure. So, anyways, congratulations on quitting. I'm excited. I'm invigorated to hear about other people quitting, and it's really cool because the next project is just gonna be cooler. It's going to be, maybe it will be more successful, maybe it will be less successful, but it's going to be like exactly what you want. And that's, or closer to what you want. And that's like, we live in a time where you have the ability to create stuff on your own. I self-produced a comedy special last year. I wanted to be a sports journalist at one point, and I wanted to do exactly what you're doing. And it just like, the infrastructure was not there to make money on it, right? It was like you had to have a WordPress site and get ad revenue, a fraction of a cent at a time. And now you like can really do it. Like, and people are really doing it on their own websites and their own platforms. And that's really awesome. I'm excited for you.
Yeah, and listen, I'm not going to sit here and say that it's easy to do, because you and I both know, especially with the way the economy is right now, that all these things, there's the financial aspect. That's a reality. But I do think that there's more options for independent journalism now, which we need. We need people to be able to report accurate news without having a company overbearing them. Because listen, that's a reality, that these big media companies, like, there are things that they do, whether you agree with them or not. There are things that you have to abide by, whether it is with political stances or if it has to do with the type of content you're doing, whatever. Listen, they have the ability to control what's out there quite a bit. So I think independent journalism right now is huge, with just the issues that we've had with internet, AI, all of those different things.
Sure.
I think that the influx of independent reporting that is now more available and can be more financially successful, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that you're absolutely right about the AI stuff. And I remember, so I studied journalism in college. I was editor-in-chief of my college newspaper and really was like interested in becoming a sports journalist. And I remember the day when I realized like the traditional route was not going to work for me. Is the lady who was the previous editor-in-chief. I stayed in good contact with her, and we were talking about, she wanted to be a sports journalist also, which is, I think, somewhat rare to have the editor-in-chief of a college newspaper be like a sports person followed by a sports person. And she was like, yeah, I don't want to do it anymore. And she explained, like, I went to the Seattle Times or Tacoma News Tribune at the time, and I was talking to a guy that has the exact job I want. And he just got that job, and he's 55 years old. And it was like, oh man, I don't want to be like, you're a beat reporter. That's like legit working class reporting, right? I didn't want to do that. I never wanted to do that. That's like really hard work. I just wanted to be a columnist that gave my shitty opinion and then went to sleep for a week and came back with a shitty opinion,
Yeah, and listen, that column is set up. There's still some papers that have that, but it's a lot harder to be able to. Now, what you see now is people talking shit 3 or 4 times a week instead of once. That's just kind of the way that things have changed. But I think it's like any other job. Being a beat reporter to me is a labor of love. Like I absolutely love being on the ground and being able to work with players and coaches, and I love the writing rigors. What I don't love is the word aggregation, and we see a lot of that out there now. And I get it. I understand from a business model standpoint why a lot of media outlets have gone to that. That's just not my style, though. I want to actually report my own stuff. Like I don't. Occasionally you're gonna link other people's stuff and then you're gonna go off it. That's the way I do it, not just respewing what somebody else reported or whatever. Sure. I think that is probably my biggest problem with modern media is the aggregation thing, and we see it on X with these random dudes that. It used to just be a misnomer. It's just some guy in his underwear down in his basement. Like, no, that's who you are dealing with. A lot of these guys that are like, they have blue check marks now because, well, anybody can get them, It could be some random dude down in southern Montana that has never done any sports coverage in his life and he's just making stuff up. Or he saw somebody else post something and real quick tried to make it look like he was the first one. And that is a huge problem that I don't know how we combat, to be honest. That feels kind of like one of those things we're already too far gone to fix that.
Yeah, well, I think one thing that is positive about now is because of stuff like, whatever the platforms that are available, I do think people are they're kind of pulling themselves off of Twitter for consumption and back to like somewhat longer form journalism, which is great. But the nice thing about now is you don't have to necessarily pay, which isn't, I don't know. This is like I always feel like I'm going to put my foot in my mouth on job related stuff. Because of course this means there's not like an ad person with a job, but it means that you can make a middle class living as a journalist and have control over your own destiny now. And also put out a quality product that you care about, because that's actually the thing that I think, like, I felt like it was going to sap me creatively to do the job as, like, to be even just a beat reporter, which I totally respect that you're, like, that's what you had passion for, because I absolutely did not, and I don't think that's a job you should do if you don't have passion for it.
No, I think you can say that about pretty much every job. Like, if you're not passionate about it, if you aren't putting your heart into it, then you probably should do something else. That's just my viewpoint. Sure. And that's where you use the word quitting. I use the word reevaluating. I think that everybody's got to reevaluate their lives a little bit, and that's what I just did. Like I said, I don't consider what happened with SI to be quitting. I think it was just, the fit wasn't good anymore. And I'm, again, I have nothing against any of the people that, made that decision. I made the decision on my own. And, and my viewpoint also is, listen, I've had over the years, I can't tell you, this actually used to be a stand-up bit for me back in the day when I did stand-up. I can't tell you how many damn people over the years have been like, man, I just hate your ads on your podcast, or I hate your ads on your article. And it's like, so you hate me being able to eat and survive, right?
Sure.
Like, I don't understand. Like, it's like, if you're on YouTube, just skip it. Like,
yeah, there's
a button you can do that with. You can scroll it over on this YouTube thing that apparently is now archaic. So I've always been wanting to see, like, what is that outlet where you don't have to have ads, but you can still support your family, can still support the work that you put in. And I do feel like now, again, there's no such thing as anything easy, and I'm fine with that. Like, I grew up on a farm, like, nothing was easy. Like, get up at 5 a.m., let's go feed the cows, and then do all that. Like, listen, what I'm doing now feels like a breeze compared to that. But there's actually a setup now, I think, where, at least if you listen, you got to be good at it and you got to have your heart into it, because if you're just trying to coast, you're not going to make it. That's just, this is not a business for the weak-hearted, I guess.
Yeah, well, I think that it's kind of, I will say the modern version of it is a little more democratized because you can, if you have the talent, you don't, how many people do you know who had to go through like I have a friend who's I think would have been a very good beat reporter for whatever newspaper or team, but it's like he had to go to Minot, North Dakota and all kinds of these like small towns. And it's like, it just, now you don't have to do that necessarily anymore. Like you can create a platform, and as long as the product is good and the consumers get to decide if the product is good, you have this opportunity, which is cool. But the important thing is we are here to talk about you being a stand-up comedian. That's why you're here ultimately, not to hear me pontificate from not having a journalism career, but the fact that Corbin Smith was a stand-up comedian, which by the way, I started reading your I read your bio on Sports Illustrated, and you taught in Indianapolis, and you were a stand-up in Chicago. I learned the other day, and you do you still live in Colorado and commute to the Northwest quite often? Is that true?
Yeah, but that's something that we're hoping is going to be changing because we want to be back at Seattle. But right
nice.
now, and listen. I tell people this, like, this is the labor of love aspect. I travel to every single game, and I paid my own way to do it. That's how much I value real journalism. Like, could I have sat at home at my desk after games and just typed stuff off press conferences? Sure, but that's not a beat reporter, and that's not journalism.
For sure.
So, I've poured my heart and soul into it, which is why, this new venture that I'm going on, I feel like I've got a lot of things going for me just because, I've already experienced, like, I'm a nomad reporter. Like, I'm on the move all the time. And, and I do think the backgrounds that I've had doing other jobs certainly helps too, and that's what I try to tell people. Like, I've had a number of college kids ask me, I know a lot of reporters in our industry would tell them, this is really tough business. You probably should do something else. I sure as hell don't tell kids that because, I didn't train to be a journalist. I did a lot of writing for fun. And listen, if my first school I worked at, if they would have known I did my work. I was good at what I did. I've always been somebody that can just kind of do stuff quickly. My prep period, I never did anything teaching wise ever. I literally sat in my prep period and I typed articles because that was like stress relieving to me. But it gave me a lot of experience. And then when I moved on for my last teaching job because they didn't have enough kids in their freshman class, like I was the last teacher they hired in social studies. They're like, it's not that you're not good. We just don't have any kids to put you in. So I just decided at that point, well, screw it. I'm gonna go see if I can do sports writing. So I tell kids, like, if you want to go far in this industry, it's about the grind. And I didn't consider it grind as much. To me, it was a passion. But that you have to feel that. And if you don't, you're not going to make it. And I don't care if you have a journalism degree or if you went to college for teaching or you're rocket scientist, whatever path you go. End of the day, the education to me is secondary. It's where your heart's at. That's what really matters.
You could also be remarkably good looking, and I think that'll help you. But I think. But hey,
listen, I don't have that going for me. I'm that red. You know how it is being with a red beard, but like I don't know how many times that I've had people on social media like, dude, I saw you at Walmart the other day in Everett. I'm in Colorado. You just saw another bald dude with a beard. We look, it's a dime a dozen, man. And so I don't think that that's necessarily a requirement. It certainly helps.
Sure.
But I'm an example. You don't have to be a model-looking dude to end up getting.
I'm saying being good-looking cuts part of the grind off is all I'm saying. By the way, I used to get, when Facebook started their facial recognition thing, you know how they would suggest, like, is this you? Do you want to tag yourself in this photo? I would get the craziest, like, guy on a tractor, like, guy with his family. There was always around livestock. It was like, is this you that's here? And I'm like, no, it's just another guy that looks like kind of like me, not that much like me. But yeah, Facebook was doing the same thing that random people were doing to you on the internet for a little while.
Walmart, yeah. Like, I went in Walmart and I saw you and I wanted to go up and I was scared. I'm like, I'm glad you didn't go up because you would have embarrassed yourself because that wasn't me.
I told a story on another podcast about this, but I did that to a guy in the 90s that looked like Bobby Ayala at the Point Defiant Zoo. And I was like, this was when Bobby Ayala was persona non grata but I was like, I don't care. He's like a Mariner. So I was like, yeah, of course, Bobby Ayala during the season is during the day at Point Defiant Zoo, 40 miles from the stadium, you know? But no, let's talk about your stand-up because where are you from originally? So you taught in Indianapolis.
I grew up near Fort Wayne, Indiana. So
okay, there's a club there that I work. I know Fort Wayne. There's a club now that there was a club probably when you did it too, but now they're owned by the same people that own Tacoma Comedy Club. It used to be called like Chuckles or something like that in Fort Wayne.
Are you talking about there was a Snickers comedy club?
Snickers, that's what it is. Yeah.
I performed there. Yeah.
Oh, amazing! So that's owned by the same people that own.
An open mic night. So listen, hey, you know how you said like with journalism, you realized the career wasn't for you. Like I realized that was stand-up comedy because, like, it's funny. I went to Chicago and I auditioned for America's Got Talent when I was a junior in college, and for anybody that has never done that, like, I don't know if they still do it this way. It's crazy to think that was 12 years ago, but doing what I do, like if you're a musician, you can go in and you can sing half of a song because they give you 90 seconds. Sure. For me, I walk in and I'm already nervous as hell as it was, but I walk in and they're like, you have 90 seconds and I'm an impressionist. So I'm thinking, okay, what the hell am I going to do with 90 seconds? Talking in different voices. So, you know, I'm just like, okay, which ones can I have talking to each other? And next thing you know, it turned into Smeagol, Gollum, Dr. Phil, and Sean Connery having a discussion about politics. Like, just making shit up, you know, like, you know what? I really would love it if we put ourselves in a position where we pay a bill for the process. What the hell is wrong with you, you little shit? No, so I was trying to have a conversation, and they're like, time. Sure. Like, it's like 90 seconds goes fast when you're trying to. So, like, I moved on to the next round, and then you get another 90 seconds. And at that point, I wasn't surprised anymore. It was easier. But, like, I always tell people, like, stand-up comics, any stand-up comic that goes deep in America's Got Talent, you have real talent because that's hard as hell. 90 seconds on the spot, especially if you're an impressionist. Like, because I do like 150 voices, but there's no way in hell I could fit more than 4 or 5 in a 90-second thing and get anything out of it. So I ended up getting one round away from what would have been the TV round, and then I got knocked out. And not long after that, I decided to retire from stand-up because I actually performed at Manchester College, which is where I went to school, ironically enough. And I don't know if you've ever had this happen. Like, I just froze like 2 minutes into my act. Like, I just could suddenly not process anything. And I was just frozen. I couldn't do any voices. I couldn't think of anything creative. And it's like, dude, I performed in front of 300 people in Chicago and had no problem. And I'm in front of 100 little kids in Manchester, and I'm scared shitless, probably because these people see me every day. Like, this is a small campus. Like, people. So it was different. You know, Chicago's like, I might never see any of these people again my life. So, like, the whole nerve-wracking part of it, it's crazy because now I do stuff in front of camera, and, you know, I do radio and stuff, and I have no problem with it. But, like, comedy was a different animal, man. Like, if I was in front of like friends and stuff, like I could sit up there, you know, and get raunchy with some of these voices, and like. But if it's just, you know, if it was people on campus that I didn't know, but I knew they could see me, that really messed with me psychologically. So guys like you that have done stand-up specials, like, I commend you because, like, there's a lot of people out there that I think have the talent to maybe be able to be somewhat successful, but, like, actually being able to go up there and do it in front of people that is an incredibly challenging thing to do.
Yeah, well, and also, I mean, not to be like the comedy philosopher asshole, but there's just so many points where it filters people out, right? Like you were talking about, and I believe this about journalism. It's the Minot, North Dakota. It's the 50-year or 55 years old before you become a newspaper columnist. There's so many filters that get people out of the job. And same way with comedy. It's like, are you willing to drive 3 hours? My friend says comics will drive, most people drive 1 hour to work 8. Comics will drive 8 hours to work 1. Are you willing to do that? Because if you're not willing to do that, like, it's non-negotiable. You just have to go do those things to get good. And then, like, getting good sucks. And then there's, like, no guarantee there's a payoff. And I'm telling you, like, at the, whatever stage I'm at, it's not like I'm, like swimming. I'm like Scrooge McDuck swimming in a pool of gold coins. Like, I make decent money doing comedy, but also only because if I even had to work at a time when you had to send like VHS tapes out instead of YouTube clips to bookers, I'm out. That's too much work for me. I'm not going to the store and buying VHS tapes. It's like there's so many things that are prohibitive in it, the same way as journalism, I feel like, where you're talking about traveling every weekend during the football season, and probably in the off season, it's also grueling because it's 8 hours a day in the sun. That's followed by you spend all that time in the sun, and then a coach that doesn't want to give you answers, like a coach that's not cooperative, or whoever that's not cooperative, and you've spent all this time formulating this question to be just rebuffed at the point when you ask it. That sucks. Like, there's so many demoralizing things. And I totally freezing. Oh yeah. I mean, shit, I did that like 3 weeks ago. So whatever's happened bad, I've done.
There's not a worse feeling in the world, in my opinion, because I experienced it 2 times, and it both happened in my college campus. Like I said, I performed in Chicago in front of a bunch of random people I did not know. And the show went great. I mean, and you know what I did love about stand-up is every crowd had different voices that they absolutely loved. Like when I performed in Fort Wayne, it was Smeagol and Gollum, and like, what are you doing under my loincloth? People loved that voice. But then when I went to Chicago, it was all about, for some reason, it was all about George Bush. I have no idea why, but they just wanted to hear somebody that doesn't know anything about anything.
I'm so glad I didn't have to ask for the voices, by the way. I was like wondering if you would do them if I asked, and you just did them. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah. And then like when I've never performed in Seattle because by the time I got up to Seattle, I was done with this stuff. But sure. Dr. Phil and Arnold Schwarzenegger are the ones that my Seahawks readers, like, I actually have done a few film breakdowns with those voices just for fun.
That's
like,
fun.
And there's, I always imagine what would be like if Arnold Schwarzenegger and Dr. Phil were in a broadcast booth together. And like, if Arnold Schwarzenegger was doing the play-by-play, he drops back to the 30, to the 25, he unloads it, holy cow, it's a touchdown. And you have Dr. Phil sitting there like, actually, that was a pretty shitty throw. If you look at it closely here, that dude needs some mental help. I always had fun with doing stuff like that, but I don't mix the old career with the new career very much.
Gotcha.
But I'll occasionally sprinkle in voices because it's fun. I do still enjoy doing that. But
so there's 2 comics that I'm almost certain you're aware of, but maybe what are your feelings on? So Adam Ray, obviously big Seattle sports fan, doing do you know who Adam Ray is?
I know the name. I can't say that I know. Act.
You gotta. By the way, this is gonna be an experience for you, Corbin. Not only is Adam Ray a huge Seattle sports fan, he did a guest spot on the Shane Gillis show at Climate Pledge Arena and took a picture with Mike McDonald yesterday, I think. But he is blowing up. His career has had like a massive growth period in the last year doing a Dr. Phil show, a Dr. Phil themed show, including he's had Dr. Phil and him on the show. So he's doing a Dr. Phil impression in full makeup, like full bald cap, everything. And then do you know of Dan Soder?
That name I do know. Yes. Yes.
Okay, these are both guys. So I would say Adam Ray isn't a dude that you would expect to be like a big voice guy for years, just like a straight stand-up comic. And then I remember seeing him do this Dr. Phil thing, and I'm like, what the fuck is this? And now it's like huge. It's like he's selling out theaters and huge venues doing this Dr. Phil thing, and then Dan Soder is just like an incredible comic. No comments beyond that. Just
when I was a teacher, my last year teaching was at Mount Si High School, which is just east of Seattle.
Oh yeah,
and we had a day that a lot of the teachers were dressing up because it was the Friday before Halloween. I think Halloween actually fell on a Saturday night that year. Or no, the Halloween was on game night, and it was Thursday, and I decided, because I'm a bald dude, I decided to shave down to just a mustache and wore a suit to school. I taught the entire day as Dr. Phil. And my kids, like, the kids in the class, like 90% of them, like, they could not focus on what we were doing because they're just like, and like, we were trying to go over a test they took the day before, and like, I was like, can you please come up here and explain to me why you got this question wrong? And this kid's just sitting up there just like, he's trying not to laugh. And like, by the end of the day, my throat was hurting because like I'd been talking, I was doing lectures as Dr. Phil in class, teaching about World War II that day. And then I went out in the football field coaching, and I had my get up on, and the players, I was coaching the players as Dr. Phil that day. So I've still found ways to do stuff with that. But like I said, generally, for the most part, my Seahawks content, I generally keep the stand-up stuff out of it. But I've sprinkled it in a little bit
for the best. That's it's amazing how many teachers, how many stand-ups are former teachers. Like a huge percentage makes it seem like it's going to be 40%, but there's a lot of successful stand-ups that used to be teachers, and it's always surprising to me for a couple reasons, but especially in the modern day where it's like you're putting a clip online under your given name as a teacher. Anyone could go look you up and go, oh, this person's a teacher at Mount Si High School. And then you're talking about, it's like, it seems just so crazy to me that people do that, but it's a very common job for stand-ups as they're coming up.
So I've got experience with that. My first year teaching, I think it was like 3 weeks into my job, and my principal called me down to the office, and I was like, what the hell did I do? He's like, I got something urgent I got to talk to you about. And he's like, look, you're doing a great job teaching. He's like, I got to ask about this video. And I completely forgot that there was a video that we recorded when I was in college, and my friend still had it up. And the video was called If It's Legal, It Ain't Smeagol. And I was going around the dorm with, I had shorts on, but I had a loincloth. I was going around the dorm and just picking on kids in there. I was going into random rooms and scaring people. And this video, I thought had been taken down. It was still up. So like, there was no dirty language or anything in it, but like the principal's like, you got to get this taken down. Like our kids can't see this, So luckily my friend got it taken down for me, but we had that. And then we had, they had another video on there, the Dr. Phil wife beating seminar, which was so inappropriate, and got that taken down. So like, these are videos where I was fully like in makeup, like doing the character and stuff, and I just did not realize they were still up. So yeah, I can't believe any teacher would risk that just in today's climate too, that you would have that up there. And I didn't do anything that was wrong or, but at the end of the day, I was like, I don't want to jeopardize my job, like over something goofy I did in college. So and I think a lot of teachers are probably good at it because you're in front of people regularly. And you have to find ways to keep kids interested, which I'm telling you, it's harder now than it ever has been because kids just don't have focus anymore. So having a sense of humor, I think you have to have one. You can't be that dry Bueller teacher anymore and get by, I don't think.
I had at the beginning of the pandemic, I started a podcast called Comedians in Quarantine, thinking it would be like, a couple weeks. Haha, we're going to talk to comedians while we can't do comedy for a couple weeks. I ended up getting very sad about 13 weeks in, and it turned out to be a lot longer than that. But there was, oh my God, I can't think of her name now. So this comic that I knew a little bit, and now I'm like, I was going to say my friend, but now I'm like, the fact that I can't think of her name off the top of my head maybe means not that much of my friend. But she was a teacher and she told a story on that podcast about like some kind of like inappropriate jokes she had made in class and gotten in trouble for. So the pandemic happens. She's like a staff writer on a show and worked at the Comedy Store and like a working comic. No, she didn't have a day job. Pandemic happens. Had just had a kid, has to move back in with her parents, gets a job as a teacher in Wisconsin, and then suddenly this clip of mine is just getting, or this podcast is getting so much traffic compared to every other podcast. And one of the kids had discovered that this was her like past life they didn't know about before, and she messaged me. She's like, "Can you please take this down? This is like, it's gonna lose me my job. Can you please take this podcast down?" I was like, "Yeah, I mean, of course." It had like 100 views. Now it's got 700. I hope those 600 aren't like gonna be the worst thing that ever happened to you in your life in this crucial period. But
the lucky thing for me is I never had a kid before I took that down. I never had a kid that came up like, "Mr. Smith, I saw this," and like. Because I don't know how I would have reacted. Like, my face would have been just beet red. Like, are you kidding me?
Yeah. So the way you described it, it sounds like maybe you had an act, but you also did like a fair amount of improv on stage with these voices, like kind of what was in the moment.
And I think that was probably the hardest thing. Like, when I watch guys like Jim Gaffigan is one of my favorites, and I see Jim Gaffigan doing a tour, and he's doing a lot of the same jokes. I'm like, I don't know how guys can do that in multiple places like that, because for me it was always just on a whim, like, sure, am I going to have Mickey Mouse talking to Jigsaw on stage or something like, "Oh boy, cut his head off, Jigsaw," like, like just random conversations between characters, or like there was never any rhyme or reason to what I was doing ever. And yeah. That's what made me successful for a little while, though, because, you never knew. I'd go on stage and like, all right, what voice sounds fun right now? Or what are some current events I can link to, And I think it's harder for impressionists when you're talking about like touring and stuff. Like, my favorite all time is Frank Caliendo. Frank is my favorite.
Oh, yeah, he's amazing.
I know Frank went a long time where he wasn't touring, and now I get it why. Because it's just, and also I think he was probably tired of doing John Madden, because everybody wanted to hear John Madden all the time. But it's hard to go up on a tour and just try to do, like, for me it would be like I might have a game plan that's similar, but all it takes is just getting off a tangent with a voice that people love. Like if a crowd loves Bill Clinton or something, and you get in a role with Bill Clinton, then okay, I just completely veered into left field, and well, we'll just go from there and see what happens. And I think it's a lot different than, say, somebody that goes up and tells stories, which, I sprinkled those in sometimes, but I also knew what I wasn't, I was not like you, where I could go up and like, I'm going to tell stories about my grandpa or whatever. Like, I never had that ability. It was always tying together characters in an improv fashion. And how can I make these characters funny together? How can I mix in current events? And I did it without explicit language. I definitely did some stuff that was more on the vulgar side of things sometimes, but I did it in a clean fashion, if that makes sense. So I think part of that also for me was knowing I am going to be a teacher someday. I don't really want a video coming out where I'm cursing up a storm or whatever. That just never was my style. But
it also feels like back then cursing was like so much more frowned upon, where like now it's like bosses at jobs are like there's like, oh, this is like the swearing manager, or the like teachers even now it feels like more are swearing in class, and it's like nobody cares anymore. But back then it was
I guess that's one good thing about being woke, right? We're woke to the language, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, it's funny because, I've always wondered what it would be like just to dip back into like doing like 10-minute like intro type stuff just for fun and,
Sure.
not be nervous about it anymore. But like, I know when I was actually trying to make money doing it, it did reach a point like after those couple shows in front of college kids that I knew, like I started to have doubts about myself, and it just kind of reached a point where I was like, I just don't know that this is right for me. And I think I probably made a pretty good decision, even if people do enjoy hearing my voices from time to time. I think I probably made the right call.
Yeah, I mean, well, and like I said, the biggest thing, like I said, I'm in favor of quitting, even if it's the thing that I love, because I'm in favor of quitting. I think it's good. Obviously, you definitely didn't quit Sports Illustrated. No way we could possibly call that quitting. But yeah, I mean, it's a thing that is going to be completely unforgiving the whole time you're doing it until it gets somewhat successful, and then it's going to be unforgiving in completely different ways. And in many ways, unfulfilling. Like the thing you were talking about, I fully agree with, because so right now, I totally get right now why guys never update their act. They never put out anything. And then, because right now I'm trying to write a new hour and it's miserable. It sucks. I hate having to do old jokes to fill time. And then I hate bombing with new, where I'm like, oh, the thing that did best in the show is all these old jokes and then like crowd work I did in between because I was bored of those old jokes, and the new jokes that I'm trying to work on, that was the worst part of the show. It's unarguable that was the worst part of the show. That sucks. And I totally get like what you're talking about, Jim Gaffigan going and doing those jokes in different cities every night.
Like when 30 they're new, cities on his tour. Yeah, I don't know how the dude, I mean, it's an incredible talent in itself. It really is.
When those jokes are new, it's so fun because you're constantly refining them. When you've already recorded them and you're not working on them anymore, you are just going through the motions. And what you did, there's two things about that I find like sound incredibly challenging. One is there's no days off, right? Like I got a bunch of shit going on in my life. I can drive to Everett and kind of go through the motions if I have to, and like do my act. It's fine. They get the act. It goes fine. It's not bad. And I'll still have fun. It's still more fun than, digging a ditch or whatever, but it's like, you can kind of go and like put it on autopilot for parts of a set, right? And not be, but you can't do that if you're doing like, I'm hearing how the crowd's reacting and making the decision on the next combination of voices. If you have to be very alert, very present, and then also you're never going to get bored, but you are going to have those moments where you bomb because, of course, not everybody can have a 100% success rate combining 150 characters into dialogue, right?
Yeah, and like again, like I'm saying, I remember one of the shows I had in Manchester, and the worst thing is when you have something like that. This was worse than what I was fearing, because I saw a lot of these people when I was going over to where the lunch or where dinner was at. I would see people and they would you could tell they were staring at you like, that's the dude that completely froze on stage and whatever. But the first time it happened, the first 5 minutes of the show I thought were going pretty well. And then
sure,
I said, I had a conversation that ironically involved Mickey Mouse and Yoda. And next thing that I knew, there was somebody in the crowd that was shouting, "That is so inappropriate. That is not funny." And when you're in a small auditorium like that, if that happened in Chicago where I was at, I probably wouldn't have heard that son of a bitch, I would have just been completely isolated. But this is like an auditorium and there's just people just kind of checkerboarded in. Of course I could hear this lady say that. And at that point, my head's saying, okay, clearly the audience is not liking the direction I'm going here. Where the hell do I go from here? And that's just kind of, yeah, and I think a lot of your impressionists have to do that route, because I don't know that you can come in with a formula necessarily, because you don't know what certain audiences are going to like. I performed in front of a group where I was doing Smeagol and Gollum, and I don't think any of those people had ever seen Lord of the Rings, because everybody's looking at me like, who is that? But then when I went to Chicago and performed, like I said, that one, people just ate it up and they wanted me to keep doing it. So
I never even thought of that.
You never know what you're gonna get. It's and sometimes that made it fun because I like the spontaneity of it, but it definitely added a challenge where if you got off the rails, it's really hard to get back on the tracks.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a couple jokes that are like, I have to make the reference. I have like a couple jokes that reference hip hop, and you can only go, hip hop's a very new art form, right? So if I'm going to make a reference and it's a group of 70-year-old people, there's no reference old enough for them. So I'm just like, who's someone their kids probably, that they probably heard on the news was like inciting gang violence? Maybe I'll say Tupac. That's my best shot, is maybe they've hated Tupac in the 1990s, because they just never, if you grew up in the 1970s, there wasn't mainstream hip hop available to you in your formative years, and it's just not going to resonate. And yeah, that's interesting. That's, I guess, why you need 150 voices and not just 12, because
so this is the other thing, and it's fun to talk about this because I never have actually talked about any of this, because, you know, anytime I've interviewed, it's been for like sports stuff. But
sure,
one of the things when you do that, I've always wondered how Frank Caliendo, for example, like Frank Caliendo did over 200 voices. Mm-hmm. How does some of his voices not bleed together? Because I've had a few of them. Like, I just give you an example. If you ever listen to Dr. Phil and Al Gore talk separately, like, Al Gore is really just a slowed down version of Dr. Phil. So yeah. I tried to have conversations between those two, and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't, because like Dr. Phil is more like this. And then, you know, you have Al Gore, who's like, global warming will kill us all. There's nothing we can do. Like, it's just a slower version. It's a thin line
between those two. Yeah.
But can you see what I'm saying? How, like, if you have that many voices, there's going to be ones that bleed together. I had an issue with George W. Bush and Sean Connery for some reason. And I think it was the way that I had to, like, use my tongue to do the voice. So if I ever had those two in the same thing, like, I had a really hard time going back and forth between them. Even though the voices are not the same. It was just the way that I had to do them. So that's the other thing I always tell people, like, well, if you're doing voices, that can't be too bad. Like, do you have that many of them and you end up in a situation where you have a couple that, like, there's some similarity with your tone or whatever, like, that can happen. And I actually saw Frank Caliendo do that when I saw him in person about 10 years ago, that he had two voices that I could tell he kind of stopped himself, like, okay, I got to reset myself because they're bleeding together a little bit. So that created some interesting experiences too. But the one thing I will always say that I posted a video after the fact, but when, I don't know if you remember this, when Russell Wilson, when they had the Baby Yoda picture with Russell Wilson's hair that was on social media, I remember I asked him about that after they beat the Vikings, and I think it was 2019, and I will just still forever to this day regret, because I wanted to be professional, so that's why I didn't do it, but like, I wanted to so bad ask him if he had seen that in reverse parallelism. You know, like, young Wilson, Baby Yoda meme, you are. And just see I just wanted to see what he was going to say, but I didn't do it because I was trying to stay professional, you know.
Do you think...
I don't know that he would have got it because it was Russ, you know.
Right, that's my question. I wonder if, because he's so presidential that I wonder if he's like spent any time does he watch movies? Do you think Russell Wilson watches movies?
He might, but you know, maybe we would have seen a different side of Russ if I would have done that. But like,
you could have cracked Russ open and he'd be here succeeding still.
Like that, and I posted it on social media, but. That's one that I always regret, because I would have loved to ask him that in reverse parallelism. That would have been fun.